and discussion about a good prominent Punjabi. So in the past, we discussed prominent Punjabis like Bhai Ram Singh, the legendary architect who built most of the buildings, and Sir Gangaram because they complemented each other, who made the buildings. He was a great philanthropist. And then first Indian fighter pilot in the Royal Air Force, Malik Hardeep Singh. So now we're looking for a good book to discuss where there is a mention not of one or two Punjabis, but many Punjabis. This is a book by Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed, Pre-Partition Punjab's Contribution to Indian Cinema. I went through the book. I was surprised. There's almost complete domination of Punjabis in the film industry. It's a different story that in spite of complete domination, whether they're actors, they're producers, lyric writers, or other roles, Punjabi films have not been able to make much name. Maybe this is my impression. I could be wrong. During the discussion, you can correct me. Now, we have with us a distinguished author who has given us this opportunity to have this discussion. I welcome Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed from Sweden. I think it's a good time for him to join. Now, we have two distinguished panelists. Both of them that teach English literature. Interestingly, both Madan Gopal and Professor Sachdeva, they are more interested in film industry, film actors, and others. I was surprised to get a news that during COVID period, Vivek was teaching English to the British students in London. That's very enterprising. Maybe he'll correct me. And then Madhuri Chawla teaches English, but I'm slowly, gradually trying to convert her into a good historian. She reads all books on Punjab history and moderates those books. So I'm hoping one day she'll be able to write a good book on Punjab history. Now, what is the major concern of all of us sitting here? That is our common Punjabi identity. Now, at one stage, maybe under Ranjit Singh's rule, there was very strong Punjabi identity. And I'm a student of history. When we think of revival movements in Punjab, there were two powerful revival movements. There were many, but I'm going to talk about two. The Singh Sabha movement and the Arya Samaj movement. Singh Sabha wanted to reform. Ahmadiyas, of course, were there. The Sikh society, and by the same logic, the Arya Samaj wanted to purge the Hindu society of evil practices. Logically, these two should have been complementary movements. And how they became rival movements, there you can trace the origin of partition. The Britishers were very clever. I learned when they took over Punjab, they asked the dismantled soldiers to surrender their arms, and they'll get 3 anna. If they surrender 1 rifle, they get 3 annas. But if they surrender a Punjabi qaeda, they'll get 6 annas. So that's very simple. If you want to destroy a community, kill their language, kill their culture. Who had a common culture, common language called Punjabi culture. This was slowly fragmented. I don't know how this happened. How language got communalized. Gurmukhi script coming from the mouth of the Guru. Then Shahmukhi, Shah, the high people, not ordinary people. And then Devanagari, correct me please, I'm not very knowledgeable on linguistics, Madan Gopal can correct me. Devanagari. So the script became sacred and dispute. Sikhs will not use call other script than Punjabi, and this is what led to division. And ultimately, we were to pay very heavy price. In Ishtiaq Ahmed's book, while he talks of actors and everyone, again and again he comes to this composite Punjabi culture. His concern is why the two Punjabis, they can't again think of a country which becomes borderless. I think efforts were made by first Vajpayee. I like to give him little credit for this, when he went to Lahore to fly the kites and started bus service. Manmohan Singh was very clear that there should be free trade between the two countries. Borders become meaningless, let them remain. So I would like to welcome Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed, that he has done his service by pointing out time and again Punjabi identity of these actors, whether they were Sikhs, Hindus or Muslims, but they were all proud Punjabi. So with these few words, I welcome you all again. I also welcome the audience which has joined us for online, and I request my colleague, Dr. Madhuri Chawla, to introduce the book and the author. Dr. Madhuri Chawla.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mahendra Singh ji, and thank you for reposing such faith in me. I hope your words come true one day.
They'll come true.
Thank you, sir. A very good afternoon to the panelists and the audience who have logged with us today. A friend of mine from Odisha often comments, she says, Madhuri, why do you keep harping on partition? We go for our morning walks together and she often says, why do you keep harping on partition? It's so many decades now, move on. Moved on, of course, we have, but partition and the beautiful, memorable pre-partition times and their narrations are an integral part of a Punjabi's lifeblood, I feel. And the book for discussion today also bears testimony to this fact. Professor Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed's Pre-Partition Punjab's Contribution to Indian Cinema. The book is primarily the story of the contribution of Punjabis to Indian cinema, a journey which began with his short stories written when he was already settled in Sweden and written for the Pakistani newspapers, Daily Times and Friday Times. Yet, the story is inseparable from the partition. Partition is actually woven into the fabric of the narrative, and the book has been published by Akar Books in 2022. And we have a very distinguished panel today for book discussion on this today, and it is a privilege for me to welcome them on behalf of the National Institute of Punjab Studies, Bhai Veer Singh Sahitya Sadan. We have with us Professor Vivek Sachdeva, who is from Guru Gobind Singh IP University and is the president of Association for Film Studies in South Asia. And we also have with us noted scholar, singer and lyricist, Dr. Madan Gopal ji. We are lucky that the author of the book, the renowned political scientist, Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed, is also amidst us today, amidst as in virtual mode. And we extend a very warm welcome to him also. Professor Ravel Singh couldn't join because of some urgent work that he had today, but he's a constant source of support to the organization for all the events and programs that are organized by the Sadan. It is indeed a matter of great honor for me to moderate this session for such an esteemed panel, and I'm deeply indebted to the Sadan, and particularly to Professor Mahendra Singh ji for providing me this opportunity. The entire exercise actually is a great learning experience for me, and it introduces me to books on diverse subjects besides literature, which is primarily my area, and also I get the opportunity to listen to experts on varied subjects. So this helps me widen my horizon as well. This book by Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed traces the deeply entrenched cultural links between India and Pakistan, how the pre-partition film industry was active and flourishing in Lahore and Bombay, and a healthy cooperative spirit was developing, which, however, was snapped, though not completely severed by the partition. We still have Pakistani plays which are so popular in India. And of course, Bollywood is equally popular across the border. So he traces, in the book, he traces the life journey of several towering film personalities, including actors, producers, directors, scriptwriters, etc., who moved from Lahore to Bombay, leaving Lahore, as he himself says, a much poor cultural center in the process. Right from Prithviraj Kapoor, Raj Kapoor, Dilip Kumar, Devanand, Suraya, Kamini Kaushal, Rajesh Khanna, Vinod Khanna, Dharmendra, Jitendra, Balraj Sahni, Sunil Dutt, Manoj Kumar, Prem Chopra, you name them. Amrish Puri to Vinod Mehra to Kabir Bedi and Om Prakash, and lyricists like Sahir Ludhianvi, Rajendra Krishan, Madan Mohan, producers, directors, B.R. Chopra, I.S. Jauhar, Ramanand Sagar, to name a few. The film industry suddenly seems to be the domain of the Punjabis, as Sir himself said, and not the Khans, as we presume now and generally proclaim. So we have them all here in this book: lead artists, characters, actors, comedians, villains. And we meet them all as we turn the pages of the book. A very well-researched book, a labor of love for Professor Ahmed, who himself says that he's an incorrigible movie buff, having watched Raj Kapoor's Awara 25 times, as he tells us. Amazing, and some passion indeed. The narration, interspersed with personal details of the artists, makes it, it makes it all the more interesting. For instance, Gulzar Sahab being Sampuran Singh, and Manoj Kumar, a switch from Hari Krishan Giri Goswami, adds some juice to the serious note of the narration, which is written in the backdrop of partition. And it also deals with the upheavals caused by partition, the migration across the borders, both sides. And it also deals with the role of cinema in shaping, molding, redefining social and cultural mores, its role in questioning and challenging dogmas and tradition, and creating a mass culture. I think the two panelists would be able to throw more light on it, which is generally, creating a mass culture which is generally progressive. And as the editor of the book, T.C. Ghai, states here at page number 176, he says that, and I quote here, that Professor Ishtiaq's interest in cinema of the period under study here lies, in my view, in its role primarily as a liberal, multicultural worldview that transcends political, religious, and social boundaries, unquote. Well, these are just a few of my observations on the book. And like you all, the audience, I am eager to be enlightened by the informed and profound presentations of our esteemed panelists, who would give us a nuanced view and a nuanced perspective of this very interesting piece of work. Our first speaker for the day is an expert in the field of film studies and film adaptations of the novel. We have with us Professor Vivek Sachdeva. He has been teaching subjects like literature and cinema, philosophy of literature, romantic poetry, writings beyond literature, etc., and has also been shouldering administrative responsibilities as coordinator of various programs and committees in Guru Gobind Singh IP University, New Delhi. Besides, he's also an accomplished translator and has translated 2 books of Hindi poetry into English, and is presently translating a book of Punjabi poetry into English. Professor Sachdeva, incidentally, I also translate from Punjabi to English, and I know how hard it is to translate poetry. It's really a tough task. Although I translate only fiction, poetry I just can't handle. But I must congratulate you on that. And another interesting ongoing project of his is the study of Shyam Benegal's cinema. While his book, Fiction to Film, Ruth Praver Jhabwala's The Householder and Heat and Dust, is very well known, Professor Sachdeva has also written several other books and articles in reputed journals. Besides, He has presented research papers at several national and international seminars and conferences in India, America, England, New Zealand, etc. He has also functioned as the editor of Indraprastha, an international journal of culture and communication studies. So over to you, Professor Sachdeva, and we would love to listen to your informed views in detail. But just that I have this very unpleasant task of indicating the time frame. Because of paucity of time, we'll have to stick to a 20 minutes time frame. So, sir, the mic is all yours now.
Thank you, Madhuri ji. Thank you very much. Couple of corrections. Taught English too. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I only got visiting professorship at Birmingham City University, which is still active. It's for 3 years. Yes, I got that during the lockdown period. Mahendra Singh ji is very right while saying that. But I never got the opportunity or the privilege of teaching English to English. That is one thing. Second, the project that Madhuri ji was talking about on Shyam Vinegar, that has been completed and it has been published by Rockland. It's out there in a book form. So, but other things that Madhuri ji was saying about me, I think she was being too generous. I'm a very ordinary person who is trying to understand a couple of things, cinema being one of them. Literature is certainly my primary concern. Music is another. And I think that by engaging with different art forms, somewhere we also try to understand ourselves. Mahendra, before I begin, should I speak in English or should I speak in Punjabi? Because
your choice. Choice of audience.
Yes, I still remember that program when we were discussing Prakshit Sani Saab's book on Balraj Sani ji. तो मैं यही पूछ बैठा मैं जी किस ज़ुबान च गल कर रही है. He almost snubbed me. कहते तू पंजाबी है? मैं कहा हाँ जी. कहते फिर पंजाबी बोल.
सारे पंजाबी हैं.
So you tell me कि जो भी थोड़ी बहुत गलबात करनी है पंजाबी च करिए कि यहाँ अंग्रेजी च करिए.
मेरी मनो तो पंजाबी च करो. मैं तो यही सोच रहा था भी स्पीकिंग इंग्लिश.
हाँ जी.
बहुत बढ़िया.
बहुत मेहरबानी. ते हुन जो थोड़ी बहुत मैनू पंजाबी बची है मेरे अंदर मैं उन्हें जिंदा रखने की कोशिश कर रहा हूं क्योंकि अंग्रेजी
बहुत चंगी साडी मादरी ज़बान है. बचाओ इन्हों.
ਤੇ ਜ਼ਰਾ ਆਸਾਨ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਬੋਲਣਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਈਸਟ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੁਣ ਬੋਲੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਇੰਨੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਸੈਂਸਿਟਾਈਜ਼ਡ ਹਿੰਦੀਆਈਜ਼ਡ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਆਈ ਵਾਸ ਵਾਂਸ देयर ਤੇ ਸਪਾਸਨਾਮਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਪੜਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਦਿਸ ਵਾਸ ਦ 3rd of March 2013 ਜਦੋਂ ਮੇਰੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਵਾਲੀ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਪਾਰਟੀਸ਼ਨ ਤੇ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਆਈ ਸੀ. ਸੋ ਦੈਨ ਆਈ ਹੈਡ ਟੂ ਰਿਸਪੌਂਡ. ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਜੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਸੱਜਣ ਨੇ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਦਿਲ ਨੂੰ ਤੇ ਬੜੀ ਅੱਛੀ ਲੱਗੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਲੇਕਿਨ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸਮਝ ਕੋਈ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਈ. ਲਿਹਾਜ਼ਾ ਜ਼ਰਾ ਆਸਾਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੋਲੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਉਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬੋਲਣਾ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਲੋਕ ਸਾਡੇ ਵੈਸਟ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਵੀ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਨਾ they should not be isolated. ਜਾਂ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਬੋਲੋ. I mean either of the two.
चैलेंज विवेक जी. चैलेंज
मेरे को बिल्कुल आम आदमी वाली
प्योर पंजाबी बोलो जी पाकिस्तानी दे.
ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਉੱਥੇ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰਾਂਗਾ ਕਿ ਮੇਰੇ ਵੀ ਫਕਰ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਇਸ਼ਤਿਆਕ ਅਹਿਮਦ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਸ
ਅਸਲੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਕੋਈ ਡਿਸਟਰਬੈਂਸ ਹੈ. ਡਿਸਟਰਬੈਂਸ ਹੈ. ਜ਼ਰਾ ਦੇਖ ਲਓ ਆਪਣਾ ਮਾਈਕ ਜਾਂ ਵਟਐਵਰ. ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਸਟ੍ਰੀਮਿੰਗ ਵੀਕ ਹੈ ਉੱਥੇ.
ਅੱਛਾ
ਹਾਂ ਵਿਵੇਕ ਜੀ ਦੇਖੋ ਕੋਈ ਇੰਪਰੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ.
I think the image got staggered and then he's left. So
maybe got disconnected.
No, he's trying to rejoin. So yeah, let's wait.
मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
आ गई जी. करो जी.
जी.
इब्तिदा.
ये कह रहे थे कि मेरे वास्ते फख्र की गल है कि इश्तियाक अहमद साहब की
नहीं, आवाज ठीक नहीं है जी।
डिस्कस
आवाज नहीं ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਸਹੀ
बिल्कुल ठीक नहीं है।
मैं एक छोटी जी रिक्वेस्ट करदा तुसी मदन गोपाल जी शुरू करो इन द मीनवाइल मैं अपना कनेक्शन थोड़ा ठीक करने की कोशिश कर
ठीक है मेरे ख्याल
चलो
ਇਹ ਬਿਹਤਰ ਹੈ ਇਹ
ਤੁਹਾਡੀ
ਬਿਹਤਰ ਹੈ
मदन गोपाल जी से शुरू कर दे मैं फिर बाद में आऊंगा
No, I'll begin.
माधुरी जी थोड़ा सा ब्रीफली इंट्रोड्यूस
हाँ जी
करो
हाँ जी हाँ जी सर
वो हो गई मेरी इंट्रोडक्शन का दी है।
Of course, sir, you need no introduction,
Oh, yes.
but I'll do the protocol. Our other esteemed panelist for the day is Dr. Madan Gopal Singh ji. Born in the border town Amritsar 3 years after independence or partition, Dr. Madan Gopal Singh ji was raised in a refugee colony in Delhi. He graduated in literature and in linguistics and went on to do his PhD in film semiotics in 1991. Dr. Singh has traveled widely and delivered lectures, conducted workshops and lectures on cinema, cultural histories, and has also excelled as performer-interpreter on Sufi and other genres of poetry at universities and institutes in America, Canada, Brazil, Australia, England, France, Spain, Bangladesh, Nepal, Oman, and several others. He has also taught literature at a college affiliated to the University of Delhi. So you must divulge the name of the college. And he was a senior fellow at the Nehru Museum and Library. In his pursuit of academic excellence, he was associated with the Journal of Arts and Ideas, executive director for close to 10 years, and has written for Cinema, the Asian Film Quarterly, as well as Economic Times, Tribune, etc. A versatile artist himself, he has been closely associated with a number of plays, films, and web series as scriptwriter, singer, lyricist, music composer, and actor. And we have just learned that he sings very melodiously as well. Some of his better known works relate to films like Rasa Yatra, Paradise on a River of Hell as composer and singer, Ekti Nadir Naam as scriptwriter and lyricist, Khamosh Pani as music composer, singer, lyricist, and actor. So I want to see the movie again to locate you there on the screen. Then Kissa as dialogue writer and lyricist, and several others. He has also sung for a number of films and plays, including Khayal Gatha, Kasba, Idiot, to name a few. On behalf of the Sadan, I once again welcome you, sir, and request you to enlighten us with your impressions of the book and of course, the 20-minute time frame. I'm sorry to mention again.
I will be very brief. And
No.
first of all,
As
thank
we
you very
would
much.
love to listen to you, sir, as long as you are willing to enlighten us.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for pulling me back from the brink. I had almost, given up my engagement with cinema. Cinema in the sense, film theory and film history. That's something that I taught for a few years, in addition to literature. And I feel like a dinosaur, actually, sort of, coming back to speak on books relating to film history, because the last I did this was in maybe 2002, so almost 20 years ago. After that, my engagement with cinema has been one of participation. And so there were 3 books that I just happened to look at this year. All 3 of them had to do with Pakistan, and 2 of them had to do with the partition. One, of course, the most eminent book was written by Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed Sahab, and the other is Evacuee Cinema by a lady called Salma Siddiq. And there's a third book which is by Iftikhar Dadi, which is on Lahore and Lahore cinema. So these 3 books I just happened to just look up. I must also sort of tell you that Professor Saab's book was stolen by a friend who has a rather short memory, and he has forgotten to return the book. Yeah. So you can understand that there is an eminence attached to your name and the work that you've done, which is in great detail, which is a bit of a, if I may put it like that, in the genre of it's a mini encyclopedic work of that period. So जनाब मैं बड़ा जड़ा है ना कि I'm really grateful to come across this this book, because my family is from Lahore. And my father used to talk a great deal about his days that he spent there in Lahore and the films he saw. I mean, the very first song that I learned was Bajade Sunade Krishna, Murli Ki Taan Tu Sunade Krishna, which I think goes back to the 30s. I don't know which film it is. I still remember the tune. Yeah. So, basically, when I started, as a student of cinema, when I started looking at, and I haven't seen much cinema from Lahore, I must confess, in the beginning. And my introduction to that cinema now comes through your book. So my introduction to the cinema in Lahore is through two films, both in the early 40s. I think one was in 1941 and the other was in 42, and both of which you have written in some detail in your book. One was Khazanchi, and that was Dalsukh Pancholi's work. And the other was Shaukat Hussain Rizvi's Khandan. That too you have written in some detail about. So whatever little that I remember of those films is that there is a riveting heer in Urdu. I mean, when I say heer, so I'm talking about the melodic genre, but it's not really heer. So there is this protagonist traveling on foot all the way from Bombay and coming to Lahore. At that time, it was Bombay. And there is this genre, heer genre, being played in the background in the voice of Rafiq Ghaznavi. So I just loved that. That stayed with me a great deal. So when I saw that reference in your book, I was suddenly excited about that. And then, of course, the other is Khandan. These are the two films that I had seen. Now, your book actually sends me in various directions. So I start building a kind of a cartographic sort of approach. So when I'm looking at all this, one of the things that strikes me immediately is that in what way is cinema that is being produced in Lahore, in what way is that cinema different from, let's say, the cinema that was being produced initially in Kolhapur, and then a little bit in Pune, and then finally in Bombay. I'm basically talking about the Prabhat studios, where people like V. Shantaram, etc. were working. And then I'm also looking at the cinema that was being produced in Kolkata. I'm talking about these two because in your book there is a clear reference, and that's really very, very helpful, that the people who actually started in Lahore, they also started leaving pretty soon. And they migrated to cities like Kolkata, and that time Calcutta, and to Bombay. So I was trying to figure out why that was happening. There was some indication of that in your book when you were talking about the larger economic concerns. And, when I started as a student of cinema, the one thing that immediately caught my attention was that there were two trends. I mean, if you go back to the very beginning of cinema itself, so you have either the simple sort of, single frame representation of what is going on. For instance, the arrival of a train and all that in Lumiere Brothers. Or for that matter, you have the other cinema, which was happening simultaneously, where you have the magical core, as in the cinema of George Méliès. And when I look at Dadasaheb Phalke, I'm really astounded, because what Dadasaheb Phalke is doing initially was to create a cinema in which he's using both techniques, which is really realistic. His first film is about the sprouting of a pea in time-lapse photography. So what he does is, this is the first Indian film. So what he does is, he plants that thing, and then in time-lapse photography, you see the things are beginning to emerge. So what he's doing is, he's bringing the realism and the fantasy together. So he's creating a hyper-reality. When I look at the cinema in Lahore, and I compare it to the cinema that was being produced in Bombay and in Calcutta, I'm struck by the absence in the Lahore cinema to that kind of entrenched technology which is available in Bombay, which is available in Calcutta. I was wondering, and I would seek your opinion on that, whether these people were leaving Lahore only because they had larger economic sort of concerns, or also because they wanted to engage with a developing technology, new ways in which narrative was being set up. I'm at times, I'm really astounded at the absence of any direct reference in the little bit of cinema that I have seen from Lahore to what is happening in the rest of the subcontinent. It is not the case in the 30s in, let's say, Prabhat Studios. In Prabhat Studios, the references to, for instance, if you are looking at a film like Sant Tukaram, which is 1936, then you will see that Sant Tukaram is actually a subversive way of recreating the persona of Gandhi. Because you can't directly deal with Gandhi. And you also have a film like Duniya Na Mane, which is about a woman who's rebelling. I think that's really fantastic. Or you have a film like Duan Ke Barahat, sorry, not Duan Ke Barahat, but Amrit Manthan, which is, breaking all those larger iconocities which are mythological, and therefore trying to create a parallel, narrative. That I unfortunately find missing in the cinema which was produced in the early 40s in Lahore. The other thing which strikes me is that, and there is a distinct development from Khazanchi to Khandan. In Khazanchi, I mean, they're trying to somehow dabble with, like in that Saban ka, what is that song, which happens when these boys and girls going on bicycles. Saban ke nazare hai, aha, aha, that is Ghulam Haider Sahab. So what is happening there is that he is using the technique of back projection. That technique of back projection is really obsolete if you compare that to the way back projection is used in Bombay and in Kolkata. That is one. The other is the landscape elsewhere is far more vibrant. So when these Punjabis actually go out, like Kedar Sharma reinvents this whole idea of landscaping and whole idea of the frame. I think, for instance, he, for the first time in the work of a Punjabi, suddenly you see that out-of-frame reality becomes very real in Kedar Sharma. If there is a frame and there is a girl who's coming from outside, she's looking out, and what she's looking at is not available. And she's looking at, and she's even talking. The gaze is actually going out of the frame. So that and this is also available in Nichanagar, and that is Chetan Anand. And of course, you had this Peer Saab's, this what's it called? There are these the Peer Foundation in Lahore.
Yeah, Usman Pirzada's father.
Usman Pirzada's father.
Rafi Pirzada, yeah.
Yeah, Rafi Pirzada was actually the lead in.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Nichanagar.
So,
yes.
What is happening is that these people, there is a kind of an opening up because of their going out. And in fact, they enrich the cinema, which is a point that you have very well made. They enrich the cinema in Lahore. They enrich the cinema because now they, for instance, this thing of out of frame reality is the contribution of the Punjabis from Lahore. It was not there earlier. I at least I don't see it. I don't see it in Bengal. I don't see it in this thing. This thing. The other thing is, and this, I will actually need to know from you because you are a musician yourself. When and there's just two things I'll mention and then I'll stop. One is technologically, what are the film labs available in Lahore? Because if you're making a film and it's on a kind of an emulsion sort of print, then where is your film getting processed? That is one. If it is going out and if they're getting it processed in Bombay, because that industry, there is no trace of that industry up to about late 1940s. The other is, and this is interesting because when they begin to deal with technology, sound technology, for instance, Ghulam Haider, and Lata Mangeshkar actually mentions this. She says there were two persons who taught me how to actually handle the mic. One, of course, is Ghulam Haider. The other is Anil Biswas. Now, what Ghulam Haider taught Lata Mangeshkar is also an act of self-education. Because if you look at Noor Jahan approaching the mic, and if you look at Lata Mangeshkar approaching the mic, these are two distinctly opposite ways. And this is what Ghulam Haider taught Lata. He said you cannot emulate Noor Jahan because she is a very powerful voice. So what you have in your favor is technology. And with that technology, you can create multiple layers. So you have to come close to the mic, you have to go away from the mic. That is something that she tried under the baton of Khemchand Prakash, and you've mentioned Khemchand Prakash in your book. When she was doing that song at the cusp of independence of India, Aayega Aane Wala. I mean, the way she, and Nasreen Munni Kabir actually makes a reference to that in her book on Lata Mangeshkar, where she says that Khemchand Prakash made her walk from a distance of about, let's say, 10 yards. And she is walking slowly and slowly towards the mic, singing. खामोश है ज़माना चुपचाप है नज़ारे आराम से है दुनिया बेकल हैं दिल के मारे ऐसे में कोई आहट इस तरह आ रही है जैसे कि चल रहा हो दिल में कोई हमारे और दिल धड़क रहा है इस आस के सहारे आएगा आएगा आने वाला आएगा. Now, what fascinatingly, the song becomes not only about the narrative which is going inside the film, it also becomes a song about the independence, the narrative of independence of the whole of India now waking up to independence. So this duality, this two-voice thing, that the same, because under the censorship which is prevalent at that time, you cannot actually subvert. You cannot directly sort of address that, so you have to subvert. That was primarily Ghulam Haider's contribution in creating the persona of Lata Mangeshkar. And when he goes back, and in fact, he lived up to 1950, if I'm not mistaken, and he passed away in 1950. The amount of work that he did at that time, and everyone acknowledges its, its excellence, and you have, of course, underlined that in some detail in your work. This, and then, of course, I am also, finally, I was wondering why these people who leave Lahore, why do they go to, let's say, Shantiniketan? What is the engagement between Balraj Sahni and Rabindranath Tagore? And he's not the only one who goes there. There are many more from the film industry. Then I was also, this one thing, finally, and this is where I end, and I need your comments on this. What is the contribution of IPTA, Indian People's Theatres Association, and Progressive Writers Association? Because a whole range of them actually traveled from Pakistan, especially Lahore, and became not just integral part, they actually changed everything. They questioned the utopia that happened after independence, and they also sort of, unleashed many dystopic voices. So for me, and this is the last, by way of tribute to your work, this has suddenly opened up so many vistas for me. I mean, I have not been looking at film theory for some time. My entire sort of, thing is about the theory in France and the theory in Germany and theory in wherever. So I will leave it here with just one more sentence, and that is, and this is post your book, and you will probably enlighten us there. How did the cinema produced in Lahore relate to the question of partition? Because in Bengal, immediately after partition, you had films like Inaugurated, you had films like Meghta Ka Tara, you had Trubandha Rekha, you had Komal Gandhar, so the whole range of films. The only film that I know of from Lahore that was made in 1959, if I'm not mistaken, was Kartar Singh. But you would, of course, as somebody who's actually spent an entire life working on partition, will be able to enlighten us on this. I stop here, and कोई महाराज कोई बेदबी या कोई गुस्ताखी हो जाए तो मैं हाथ जोड़ के ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਹੀ ਮਾਫੀ ਮੰਗ ਲੈਂਦਾ. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Should I respond, madam?
Yes, sir, sure.
Yes. First of all, thank you very much for introducing so many other perspectives on cinema, the role of technology, what could have motivated these Punjabis to move from Lahore, maybe to Bombay or Calcutta. Actually, in my book, let me confess, that's not my concern at all. My concern is, here were these Punjabis, they came to cinema, where did they go, why did they go, and when they did, what are their achievements? So I have not looked into the technical part of it at all, but now that I hear you, I am sure that must have been some incentive that, you see, Lahore started, from what I understand, in 1927, when Mia A.R. Kardar, and his friends, they bought a camera and they set up some studio on Ravi Road, Lahore. And then there was a gentleman, Mr. Mehta, who was a photographer trained in Germany. He was in Lahore, a Punjabi as well. And that's the beginning of the Lahore film industry, if we can call it. as we know already at the turn of the 20th century, the financial capital of India was Bombay. So anybody looking for big capital, big investment, big breakthrough would be attracted to Bombay. Lahore primarily made Punjabi films till about 1940s, and Khandan and some films in Urdu then started being produced as well. So people, what I have argued and which I think needs to be underlined is whether we like it or not, because Professor Mohinder Singh ji started by this great complaint that Punjabi was subverted, and which probably is true. But that's a different debate. I have a different perspective on it. What I have argued is that whether inadvertently or by intention, when the British came to Punjab, they had to decide how to control this region, which they thought was very useful for them in their game in playing the great game. The Bengalis, the Biharis, and the rest had revolted during 1857. So all their favors moved then to the Punjab. And in doing so, one of their major creation was the Indian army. So if they wanted an army with the same language, which everybody could be educated in, ordered in, whatever you want to call it, they brought Urdu to Punjab. So educated Punjabis, Hindus, and Sikhs all were conversant in Urdu. And this proved to be a great asset to them, because the capital of the film industry in the subcontinent was Bombay, with Calcutta maybe competing second to it. Lahore was regional cinema, mostly Punjabi entertainment, boy meet girls, Heer Ranja, and things like this. So if these Punjabis were ambitious and they wanted to have an audience far wider than the Punjabi audience, the natural attraction was already to start trying their luck in either Calcutta or Bombay, and many of them tried both Calcutta, and then finally, because of partition, then Bombay became Bollywood, the even bigger player in the film industry, and so that's the story I've told in my book. So I'm sorry I wouldn't be able to respond to the role technology may have played, and I don't think actors were thinking in those terms, even singers for that matter. They just went looking for work. Rafi went there, and Shamshad Begum, they were just fantastic singers. And wherever there was employment, they were attracted to those places. And what I'm saying is that people were shuttling all the time. There was a united India then. So you could be in Lahore one day and in Calcutta or Bombay the next day. So what we find now is the problem of a partition, and Lahore is thousands of kilometers away from India in one sense. You can't go to one place, but at that time, this was not the problem. So the book actually looks at these fantastic people, some filmmakers, songwriters. You mentioned the progressive writers movement. Of course, one of my arguments is that when Lahore was burning and the Hindus and Sikhs had to flee for their lives, the Muslim colleagues of these Hindus and Sikhs in Lahore ensured that most of them, or almost all of them, could cross the border safely. That didn't prevent studios being set ablaze and properties being looted, but at least the lives of these actors, film producers, songwriters, from what I have checked, and I've checked very thoroughly, none of them lost their lives while the partition was going on. So for me, people with a humanist, secular, if we want to call it, understanding of life and of India, they were attracted to films because, first of all, it was a much larger medium through which they could reach people, and it was also comparatively a better paid livelihood. So I think these are the factors which probably attracted Punjabis. The fact that they were good looking must have helped, surely. Tall, things like this. And if they weren't that, there could be directors and there could be songwriters. I mean, the whole lot. This is called chain migration. Once Kardar, Mia Sahib went there, many people from Lahore would just end up there and find help in settling. And there were Sikhs from Lahore. I don't know how many of you have read my book, but let me take this opportunity and liberty to say that the latest edition of my greatest work in my life, the Punjab Bloodied, Partitioned and Cleansed, has been released by Rupa once again, in which I have actually brought 4 poems and presented them. Amrita Pritam, you can't do without her. Her poem Gulzar Saab's Zero Line, Sahir's Fazes, Ye Daag Daag Ujala, The Tainted Dawn. And one poem which I think is the greatest of all on the partition is Sahir Ludhianvi's Mufahamat, Compromise, where he was one of those leftists who didn't accept the Communist Party of India's decision to support the idea of Pakistan because he thought this was a communal, regressive way of understanding freedom. So compromise then is you compromise on the ideals for which people fought for the freedom by dividing people on the basis of religion. Now, I mention this because somehow partition was brought in by Dr. Madan Lal Singh ji, and in my Punjab book, I have said there is a problem when it comes to West Pakistan or Pakistan. While in India, lamenting, deploring the partition makes a lot of sense, and people are doing it all the time. In Pakistan, the official ideology says that this partition was necessary to enable Muslims to come up because in competition, they were far behind the Muslims and Sikhs. So it's a hush-hush-up thing when it comes to partition. But let me argue with all of you. I mean, you are very learned people, far more learned than me when it comes to the scholarly part of it. I'm a political scientist. I think the greatest film, the greatest Garam Hawa and all these films included, made on partition, is Kartar Singh. It's a very simple production, but it's one production where the actual events of the partition are so well captured in the background of a village. And now, for example, in Pakistan, cultivating the Sikhs is part of the Pakistani approach. Demonizing the Hindu is also the approach. Sikhs are in, Hindus are out. But if you look at Kartar Singh, you find all these characters as human beings, and there is no way to demonize anyone but to bring out the human parts of how they battle with this idea of a country being divided on the basis of religion. So Kartar Singh, for me, is the greatest intellectual intervention. It lacks the technological finesses that Dr. Madan Lal Singh talked about, and I'm sure if they had the support of such technology, the film could have been an international event. It was made on a very small scale, and the writer was from Amritsar, actually, Saifuddin Saif. And Madan Lalji, you must have definitely heard many of his great songs, including Jab Tere Shahar Se Guzarta Hoon. Jab tere shahar se guzarta hoon, jaane kya kya khayal karta hoon, jab tere शहर से गुजरता हूँ. So whenever I go to Lahore, I always sing this dutifully, remembering all the girls whom I left in Lahore 50 years ago.
Oh my
जब
God.
तेरे शहर से गुजरता हूँ, you know. So Saifuddin Saif film Kartar Singh, if my friends have not seen it in India, please do see it. I think it's a great film, so honestly, so boldly made, and it was passed in 1949 when Ayub Khan was having his martial law. And I have a theory that Ayub Khan, despite being a military ruler, was far more enlightened than many of our politicians. And that's another argument which is outside the scope of my book. So maybe that's my response to you, that I was looking at the human element. What made Prithvi Raj Kapoor, you know, leave law college, go there, and how did he succeed? And his children and Dilip Saab, I have met of them, many of them, songwriter, Naksh Lailpuri, I met him, and Gulzar Saab, I have met. So many of them I have met. You know, now as a writer, I have followers. But you know, all of us then are followers of someone else. So that's how life is. I think that's my response to you. That's my response to you.
Thank you.
Is
Thank you
Vivek
so
ready?
much.
जी बिल्कुल.
Yeah.
I think
I
so.
would
Vivek,
first
yeah,
like
good.
to thank.
ਸੋਹਣੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਨਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਹੁਣ
ਜੀ.
ਸਾਡਾ ਸੋਹਣਾ ਬੰਦਾ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਇੱਥੇ. I feel like casting in my film.
Sir, in nutshell.
ਵਾਦਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਦ ਕਰਵਾਦਾ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ.
ਨਹੀਂ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਯਾਦ ਹੈ. ਮੈਂ ਹੁਣੇ ਸਕ੍ਰਿਪਟ ਖਤਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ. ਆ ਜਾਓ ਤੁਸੀਂ. ਨਹੀਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ. ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਬੈਟੀਕਲ ਲੈ ਲਓ 6 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦੀ.
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਫਰ ਕਰੋ ਸਬੈਟੀਕਲ ਰਾਈਟ, ਮੈਂ ਰੈਜ਼ਿਗਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਦੂੰਗਾ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬੁਲਾਓ ਤਾਂ ਸਹੀ.
क्या बात.
ਜਾਏंगे आवाज खुद ही होती.
ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਕਹਿਤਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹੁਣ.
ਚਲੋ ਇਸ ਸਬਬ ਨਾਲ ਜੇ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਫਿਲਮ ਬਣ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਰੋਲ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ.
This will be, you know, we are looking for somebody between the age of 40 to 45. And
about 2 years, but that can be managed. In films, that can be managed. I look younger, I know.
I know.
जी.
I think now we have to continue in English क्योंकि सारी गल्लें अंग्रेजी च होईयां ने. I think that makes sense. Yeah.
I think mix would also do, but a little bit of Punjabi in between would make it, I think, more.
Yes.
Probably, yes.
ਉਹ ਜੀ ਇੱਕ ਗੱਲ, ਮੇਰਾ ਮਦਨ ਲਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ, ਮੈਂ ਮਦਨ ਗੋਪਾਲ ਹਾਂ.
Gopal, I am so sorry.
हाँ जी, बिल्कुल.
My apologies, sir. My apologies.
ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਕ੍ਰਿਕਟਰ ਹਾਂ, ਮਤਲਬ तो ਮਦਨ ਲਾਲ, ਮਦਨ ਗੋਪਾਲ.
Gopal, Madan.
ਇਹ ਉਹ ਬੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰਜਿਸਟਰਾਰ ਸੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਦਾ.
Exactly.
At the time of the partition, he was my father's teacher.
And you know, in my book, I talk about his gruesome murder and even mention the person who did it. वो सारा इस किताब में है. I met his daughter or chacha's yani brother's wife in Madam Luthra in Oregon, and so that story is there as well.
I met his you know, I'm very close to his great grandson here.
Acha.
Yeah.
What a tragic story, Bob.
Very tragic.
Chalo ji.
Fine, thank you very much, and no need to introduce me now, Madhuri. I know you have already done that. It's difficult for me to now pick my thread because I missed most of the part that Madanji was talking about. Thanks to technology, sometimes we have to deal with the flip side of technology as well. And that is my loss. I'm very well aware of that, because when somebody, a profound personality like Madan Gopal is speaking, then one should hear to him.
It will be online, Vivek ji. You can listen it after you.
Definitely. I'll definitely go back to the recording on YouTube. See, when I was reading this book, Ishtiaq ji, I was trying to understand the internal logic of the internal logic behind the book. And you have already talked about it. You have already mentioned it. This is not a book which we can approach from the point of view of a film theorist. This is not a book which we can approach from the point of view of film criticism. This book does not deal with these two domains. I think this book contributes majorly to film history.
Right.
And for that, I must congratulate Ishtiaq Ahmed sir. Because even if we claim to be film scholars, even if we claim that we work in this area, but our information, our knowledge is always dependent on the sources available to us. When we read history of Indian cinema, there is always a mention that Lahore was one important center before the partition where we can say that Indian cinema was growing. And then partition took place, many actors, they migrated to India. And all famous actors that who are mentioned in your book, whether it is Prithviraj Kapoor or Raj Kapoor or maybe Dilip Kumar Saab, everybody knows about them. But the beauty of this book is that you have picked those female actors, directors, story writers, those who were nowhere in the imagination of a common film viewer, which is a problem with film viewingship as well, that how do we relate to cinema? How much do we want to know about those personalities who are there on the screen and those who are behind the screen?
That's right.
Fine. So it means that if our relationship with cinema is superficial, then perhaps we are more interested in looking at Madhubala and Dilip Kumar. Romance which is happening on screen is no doubt it becomes the romance of the viewers as well. And there are film theories about it, how this viewers also identify with the drama going on screen. But Ishtiaq Saab, the way he has tried to structure a book, which is not purely academic, but it has been written by a hardcore academic. So there is a blend of these two styles of writing, which I found in his book. It's very anecdotal. There are entries or the small chapters on individual personalities. He has done justice to those great personalities of Indian cinema. And while talking about those individual personalities, he is also sharing personal anecdotes when he spoke to someone on telephone or when he met someone, or anecdote he might have read somewhere in some other book or some other source. He's trying to make it anecdotal. But what I liked about this book is, while giving information about the contribution of Punjabis to Indian cinema in different departments, be it acting, be it male actors, be it female actors, be it songwriters, lyricists, music directors, singers, you're trying to give this information, very rich in information, this book is, that so many people have contributed to Indian cinema. And that is certainly, in a way, eye-opener for all of us. There are so many names, honestly speaking, this I am making a confession that even I was not aware of, though I'm not a very great film historian, I'm not. But still, when we work on certain area, or being a Punjabi, we have been watching films and we have been maybe listening to some stories about how people migrated. There's so many names who otherwise we would have forgotten. And in a way, you have preserved them. And beauty is when we start reading the book, first in a way, you have laid down the cultural matrix of Punjab. And in your Punjab, Baba Nanak appears. In your Punjab, Shah Hussain is there. In your Punjab, Bulle Shah is there. And then there is a tradition of kissa as well, story writing, storytelling as well. So by laying down the cultural matrix of Punjab, in which music is there, poetry is there, hard lines across different religious communities, dividing people into different groups is not there. From there, you are trying to build the narrative of Punjabi cinema. Second thing which I felt, I could be wrong, but that was my feeling, that I'm aware of your Lahori connections, that you belong to that place and you are not in your hometown. So whenever there is a even far-fetched connection of somebody with Lahore, you're trying to establish it. And the beautiful example is Kiyasef. You are aware of the fact that the person is born somewhere in UP, but his uncle or some other member is associated with Lahore, so you have included Kiyasef as well. Kiyasef is a part of your book. So I felt that maybe some way your own Punjabi-ness, I don't want to use Punjabi identity, it's a problematic concept for me. We Punjabis can understand what problems the whole discourse of identities has created for us. So your own Punjabi-ness and your own connection with Lahore, in a way, there is some kind of nostalgia about it.
Absolutely.
And in that, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And in that nostalgia, it is not only the streets of Lahore, it is not only the cinemas of Lahore, which you have mentioned in the beginning of the book, and there is, and film culture is also part of it. That way, I think it's a unique way of looking at history of Indian cinema. It is also a different way of looking at the cultural memory. Because looking at the author of the book, a Punjabi diaspora in Europe and Stockholm, working at Stockholm University, talking about his lost homeland, in a way, nostalgia about the homeland. And then along with that, there is also a sense of loss which is linked with the partition. That how many film artists ultimately went to Bombay, and they were rather forced to migrate to Bombay.
Right.
This is now, it's a big question, big if of history. And that is the point when I rejoined this meeting, Madan Gopalji was discussing and you were responding to his question, Ishtiaqji. That the big if is, what if partition hadn't taken place? Even then migration would have been there. Better actors, better writers, filmmakers might have been tempted to go to Bombay to make better films, because in terms of capital, in terms of technology, better resources were always there. Even many Punjabi films these days are being shot in Bombay. They are part of Punjabi film industry, but the film shooting, editing is happening in Bombay. They are not being shot in Punjab. So we need to understand that how this industry operates. But your concern in this book is more about the culture which was emerging in Punjab. And 1940s is a very important decade. I think that is where another area of research can open up. We in India have studied a lot about Indian cinema responding to the political or social situation after partition, the spirit of nation building. You have also included the films like Naya Daur and Jagriti, whether it was debate between Nehruvian vision or Gandhian vision, and how another part is the cinema has been used as a medium through which an imagination of a nation is propagated.
Right.
You have touched upon a very important decade of 1940s, that what kind of cinema was being made at Lahore. And that Lahore was not hardcore Punjabi Lahore, which sometimes can be, we can say, a part of misconstrued identity of Punjabi these days. You mentioned that Urdu Center was established in Lahore, and along with Punjabi, Urdu became a very important language. Well, there can be different, I think different people can take different takes on it. Whether it was good for Punjabi or it turned out to be bad for Punjabi, that's a debate for some other occasion. But what you have tried to build in that particular chapter is that what we call Hindustani. And instead of calling Hindi cinema, if we can use the word like Hindustani cinema.
That's good.
How Lahore was, in a way, a nursery of that culture in cinema. And from there, a culture which was growing in 1940s, it got snapped. It was violently, in a way, crushed. It actually burned down. That was another kind of violence we can associate with the partition, along with the communal violence, along with the partition, along with the violence of the colonizers when they had their own exit formula. This is another price that the Punjab had to pay.
Right.
Loss in terms of film industry, which was growing at that time. And I would like to know, after I don't have much else to say, I would like to know your views, because you have, on a couple of occasions, you have mentioned certain songs and the rag in which those songs are composed. You have mentioned Rag Yaman Kalyan, you have mentioned Darbari, you have mentioned Jaunpuri, you have mentioned Bhim Bhim Palasi. There are many songs you have given the opening line of those songs while writing your chapters. And you also sang a song now, which shows that the romantic man in you is still young.
Yes, quite right.
And you have that romance with film songs. You have romance with maybe film music as well. And that romance with cinema, what we call, and that Indian cinema is pre-partition Indian cinema. It's a cinema of these days. You can say cinema of both India and Pakistan. So it's the sentiment of that romantic person I found in the book. And with that, yes, you are certainly sharing very information about all those unknown personalities, which is really a great source of information for us all. What I was looking forward to, you touched upon only in the last chapter, and I would like you to speak more about it after I stop speaking. That is the state of filmmaking in Pakistan now. Along with that, there is another question. We know that Punjab had to pay a very heavy price of the partition, not merely in terms of the loss of human lives. Punjab has suffered a great cultural loss as well.
Absolutely.
Fine. Now coming from concern about Indian music, there are many gharanas of classical music, and the doins of those gharanas, they migrated, they are settled in Pakistan now. Whether it is Sham Churasi Gharana, or whether some musicians from Kapurthala, or even Patiala.
Yes.
Bhai Ghulam Ali Khan Saab went to Pakistan. He stayed at Kasur for some time, and then he came back and settled down in Calcutta. But other practitioners of Patiala Gharana are still there. You talked about Bhai Ghulam Ali Khan Saab's association with Mughal Azam. Everybody knows that story, that how in a way he was convinced to sing for a film like Mughal Azam. I'm curious to know, is there any relationship between classical musicians in Pakistan and film industry in Pakistan? Are they able to contribute? Are they able to enrich the music of Pakistani film industry there or not? And second, how do you think after the partition, one, the state of state, we can say Pakistani film industry is in, or Punjabi film industry in Pakistan is. Second, the state of music in Pakistan. With this, I'll stop saying, and I would like to hear more from you. Thank you very
much. Thank you very much, Professor Sachdeva. I enjoyed your review of my book, and the way you describe it is exactly the feeling with which I wrote the book. So you have captured my mind so completely that I have nothing there to discuss. No question of disputing anything that you have said. So in that sense, I can't think of a better presentation of what the book is, what motivated me, and what my nostalgia for Lahore keeps, following me all the time. Actually, every weekend, now for years, 3-4 of us meet for lunch, where the rule is we will only speak in Punjabi. Ashok Bhaskar is from Philor, Jalandhar. Then we have Ajmal Bhatt, who is from Sialkot. And then I, and a friend of ours, Khwaja Shahid, he goes back during winter to Lahore, but then comes back. So Shahid and I are from Lahore. Ashok is from Philor, Jalandhar, and Ajmal is from Sialkot. So this unit keeps the flicker burning, of Punjabiyat. There is nothing else on that day, with a lot of coarse abuse as well. I might as well admit that, because as a Lahori, that's the way we express our feelings. Yeah. So the reason I wanted to write this book was because, as you say, maybe I was a very romantic person, and my parents divorced when I was only 3. And the first song I remember I used to sing was from film Andaz, sung by Mukesh, who is my favorite. Actually, I sing mostly Mukesh songs. Toote na dil toote na, saath hamara choote na.
Ah,
My mother, many years later, said that you sang it just at that time when our family was breaking up. So that's how I recorded a trauma in my life. So that's how I am as a person. I keep falling in love despite being 75 years old, and I can't help it. But I also keep in mind that this should be just an idea and nothing more. So I've made a number of confessions. Without that sort of a personality, you can't write such a book. You have to have that feeling of wanting to live and wanting to love and wanting to embrace good people wherever they are. And my inspiration is a lot to do with Sahir Ludhianvi. I have named my son Sahir. When I did it, and my father was alive, I wrote to him that my firstborn, son, I have named him Sahir. And he wrote back that, do you know that Sahir has a negative connotation for Muslims? The reason was that Prophet Muhammad was called a Sahir, a spellbinder, by his opponents. So I said, Abba ji, hun to eda positive matlab ho gaya. So since then, that controversy is settled. So that's how I associate myself with my Punjab, which is no more. And since I'm born in 1940, for me, the 40s is what I miss. I didn't see that. And what happened to that Lahore and that Punjab happened in 47 when I'm born. So nostalgia is also trying to get hold of things which were around me when I'm born there. They were all there and they're all gone. So many of these factors must have. My Punjab Partition book, which is my greatest work, is one thing. Then I had to somehow compensate for the suffering and the loss with now going into films and restoring somehow the human part of it, the feeling part of it. So that's how this book emerged. It's not written in the form of a book. These were articles which I wrote, and then some friends said, it's time you put them together and write a book. But then while writing the book, the way I am, that's the way I do my research. I kept on discovering all these new people, directors, songwriters, and for me, recognizing people who are generally ignored or denied an identity is very important. So bringing all these people into my book was my way of respecting people who have contributed to the cinema that we associate with in such a strong way. Those beautiful people who act and all is all there. But what about the rest who imagined this film, who directed this film, and so on. So I wanted to bring in all those people who have been part of this grand production we call the Indian cinema. Something about Lahore. This film, B.R. Chopra's Chandni Chowk, it didn't do well. Originally was to be made in Lahore, and then the title was Lakshmi Chowk, because Lakshmi Chowk in Lahore is where all the actors and the cinemas are located. But before, the project was ready, I.S. Johar was and B.R. Chopra were collaborating on it. Then comes the partition. They had to run for their lives. And then the film is made under another name, Chandni Chowk, because that is Delhi. So I think I mentioned that in my book as well. I hope I do, because that's for me a very moving aspect of Chopra Sahab. And then you know this great song, Tu Hindu banega na Musalman banega. When I met B.R. Chopra, I think this was the 2nd of January 1997. In his office, he embraced me and he talked about government college. And so he said, I have a friend, Sheikh Rashid, whose children keep writing to me even now. And then when I saw this film a second time, the man who sings this song is Rashid. So he names this character after his friend in Lahore.
Mentioned that in your book. Yes.
So how can you not remember all these things and what must have gone through B.R. Chopra when he was making this film? He wanted to respect and remember his friend. And the best role is of this Maulvi with a beard saving a child whose parentage we don't know what happened. And he brings up a child, you know, that's the Gandhian idea. That when Gandhi in Calcutta met this Hindu whose son had been killed in front of him, and he said, how can I not take revenge? Gandhiji said to him that, you know, the best thing you can do is to find a Muslim boy, an orphan, and raise him and as a Muslim. So I think these were great people whose ideas were around and they influenced filmmaking and so on and so forth. But we are now living with the tragedy. Maybe that's also, I didn't mention in my book that Pakistan, you know, because being an ideological state, from the beginning, cinema was considered improper, you know. And one of the ideologues in Pakistan, Maulana Maududi, came up with this fantastic idea that making a picture with your hand, drawing, is prohibited in Islam. Now look at the logic. But this camera throws an image, and since the seeing in the mirror is not prohibited, therefore you can use cinema. But the cinema should be used then only for educational and moral purposes. So no romance, no nothing, no female characters. If at all they were needed, male actors should dress up as women and take part in it. I mean, that sort of thing happened, but Pakistan sort of was still part of a common heritage, liberal, whatever you want to call it, British period, and so on. So up to about the 60s, things were fine. Great Indian Pakistani films were made. The music was great. Whether they belong to the gharanas or not, but you know, among Muslims, there are these people who are just musicians, you know, marasis. And some of the great music directors that Pakistan produced originated from such families. They may not have belonged to these elite families of musicians, but Master Anayat Hussain, Master Abdullah, Rashid Atre, they all belong to the musician category of people. So, and fantastic music was composed. There is one song, if you permit me, can I sing a few lines of it? Because O.P. Nayyar paid it the ultimate compliment. This was composed by a 17-year-old Akhtar Hussain. This was his first song, and it's in Rag Pilu, and Noor Jahanji sang it. And my mother was very fond of it, so there is an additional reason I want to do it. Haji? Kalli kalli jaan dukh lakhte karod ve dur jaan waleya mohara hun mod ve kalli kalli jaan dukh channa teri yaad naal dukh asa pholiya ਦੁੱਖ ਆਸਾਂ ਫੋਲਿਆ ਹੌਲੀ ਹੌਲੀ ਹੰਝੂਆਂ ਦਾ ਬੂਆ ਅੱਜ ਖੋਲਿਆ ਬੂਆ ਅੱਜ ਖੋਲਿਆ ਨੈਣਾ ਵਾਲੀ ਨਦੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਿਆਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਲੋ ਰੋੜਵੇ ਦੂਰ ਜਾਣ ਵਾਲਿਆ ਮੁਹਾਰਾ ਹੁਣ ਮੋੜ ਵੇ ਕੱਲੀ ਕੱਲੀ ਜਾਨ Now, when this song was composed, and O.P. Nayyar Saab, who was from Lahore originally, very Thet Lahori, he was now in Bombay. When he heard it, he is reported to have said कि यार जेड़ा मुंडा compose कर गया मेरे सारे गाने उसते कुर्बान. And I think this was O.P. Nayyar's greatness because his own compositions are forever. So only great people can give such compliments. So I think I've responded to your concerns and my reasons for writing this book. I wish I have another long life to write a few more things, you know. Some of these books have been sent to Lahore, and the Lahore film industry now wants me to write about the story of the Pakistani cinema. The tragedy is that Lahore cinema has deteriorated to just vulgarity, you know, Punjabi loud sound and so on. Some good pictures are now being made in Karachi. So Lahore, which was once the center and once the source for exporting actors and musicians and songwriters, is in a state of decline. That's the tragedy of Pakistan. Thank you very much.
I think you
Lahore is competing with India. In vulgarity, Lahore is competing with our Pakistan. Punjab, isn't it?
सारे ही सत्यानाश हो गया सर.
सत्यानाश इधर भी हो गया जी.
उधर भी अपना राइट विंग ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਉਹ ਮੈਜੋਰਿਟੇਰੀਅਨਿਜ਼ਮ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਸਾਰੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇੱਕ ਸੈਕੂਲਰ ਗਾਂਧੀਆਂ ਨਹਿਰੂ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੋਚ ਸੀ ਉਹਦਾ ਸਤਿਆਨਾਸ਼ ਕਰਤਾ ਹੈ.
ਚਲੋ
ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹਨਾ ਸਾਂ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿ ਵੀ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਹੁਣ ਸਾਡਾ ਤੇ ਸਤਿਆਨਾਸ਼ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੀ ਹੋਇਆ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ. ਹਾਂ
ਇਸ਼ਤਿਆਕ ਜੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਇੱਕ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਹੋਰ ਲਿਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪਾਰਟੀਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਬੰਬੇ ਤੋਂ ਉੱਠ ਕੇ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਆ ਕੇ ਸੈਟਲ ਹੋਏ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੰਟਰੀਬਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਕੀ ਰਹੀ.
हाँ मैं ਹੁਣ जा ਰਿਹਾ ਲਾਹੌਰ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਦੇਖਾਂਗਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਹਾਂ I will sir I will ਮੇਰੇ ਦਿਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਹੈ. ਔਰ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਕ ਦੋ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮਿਊਜ਼ਿਕ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟਰ ਨੇ ਨਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਜ਼ਿਕਰ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਵਿੱਚ original plan is मैं और ज़्यादा लिखना सी because I'm too much into music. लेकिन in the final shape of the book because it was being edited ये वो मैं I've omitted some parts. मसलन विनोद was a musician लाहौर दा वो मेरे बड़े कज़न सन ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਦੋਸਤ ਸੀ ਲਾਹੌਰ ਤੋਂ. They were good friends. ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ son-in-law ਨਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਮੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਵੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਮਿਸਟਰੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਟੈਕਟ ਵੀ ਸੀ ਇਹ वो. But kitab is sirf Vinod is mentioned in one sentence and I was nahi hoya ki is not in the book. But there is a lot I want to write on the contribution of Punjabis to Indian films music. Mehal Bengal di bahut contribution hai aur Punjab di hai. Aur my theory is or conjecture is ke jehde riverine hundiyan ne na civilizations otte as you cross from one part of a village apna malah jehde jande ne they probably sing and so music the tradition sade wale paase Bengal vich Punjab vich bahut zyada hai. Bengal da the culture hi music oriented hai sade kyunki hun Islamism aa gaya hai. So but creative people cannot be killed by any ideology. That's what I say. That's it.
Very important statement.
हाँ जी
प्रोफेसर साहब मेरा एक छोटा सवाल है.
हाँ जी हुक्म.
वो ये कि रिवर्स जर्नीज भी हुई हैं जी. So there's a lot of reverse journey that is happening and there are musicians from Goa going and performing and actually contributing to the film music there in whichever limited limited way. That is one. And the other is that if you look at when the credits are rolling in, let's say, Khandan or Khazanchi, you will find that a whole range of people who are dealing with, and forgive me for saying this, dealing with technologies, they are actually not Punjabis. Yeah, they are coming from all over India. I mean, there are Bengalis and there are, in fact, Maharashtrians also.
Absolutely. Huh.
And of course, production is in the hands of the Gujaratis.
Right.
So, Lahore cinema as such is, as I said in the beginning, it's a different cartography. My only problem with the cinema that was produced in Lahore in the 40s, and it remains, is that Lahore cinema somehow refused to engage with what was going on in the rest of India in terms of the wide unrest that is reflected in the cinema that was made in Calcutta and in Bombay in the 30s and the 40s, and that's where I think the Punjabi the cinema produced in Lahore failed. Because
let me respond to this. I have an argument on that. In my Punjab book, I have mentioned it. Pran Neville Saab, maybe you have heard of him.
Yeah, we met him many times.
I met him.
He said that during the Second World War, while the rest of India was fighting for freedom and so on, Punjabis were seeking jobs in the British Army and administration. Punjab was a loyalist province, sir, where loyalty to the British was a price they had to pay for all the favors the British were doing to this part of India. Punjab was the darling province of the British. So the universities, the colleges, you come to Lahore, all of them were here or way back to Calcutta maybe. This was the capital of all the British were patronizing. Lahore had bars, I'm told, this is before 47.
Yeah.
And it was a very different Lahore from the one I grew up in, although that was still a good Lahore. We had a lot of Anglo-Indians and Goanis and teachers and so on. All of them are gone now. You never see them anymore because the minorities had a very rough deal in an ideological state. And if India continues that way, it will also end up becoming a very boring place to be in, I think. Yes, I can promise you.
Yeah, of course. I agree. But just one thing that I want to add to this is the contribution of the Punjabis at that time to the larger sort of,
they had to leave Lahore to do that.
Bhagat Singh, what happened? I mean, Bhagat Singh's death in the 30s, with the end of the 20s, is there. And he's not the only one. It was also the city of Inqilab. And if that is not reflected in the cinema as it is in, let's say, Prabhat Studios, or it is reflected to some extent even in new theatres in Kolkata, then there is a problem. And that problem has to be addressed. That's my limited point.
But I totally agree. I'm only explaining that Lahore cinema could not have done this because they were all under patronage of the British and they were not part of this. Once Bhagat Singh was hanged, this spirit was killed completely. And Akalis then during the Second World War didn't take part in the Quit India movement because they wanted the British to recruit more Sikhs into the army. So not only the Muslims, but even the Sikhs didn't take part in this movement against the British. The Akalis broke with the Congress party on this point. So Punjab's character post Bhagat Singh is very different. Even Bhagat Singh was a problem for those who were in power at that time in Lahore. Lahore's character politically had changed a lot after the Ghadar party incident. That's what I'm saying.
In my father's autobiography, there's a reference to two different sets of cultural events. One that happens in Hiramandi,
Okay.
and the other that happens when, and you know, in an elite sort of, you know, setup,
Ji.
where you have all these what's his name, Khizr Hayat Khan,
Ji, haan ji. Ji, ji.
and Sundar Singh Majithia, and all these people are there. So there is one kind of music culture which is happening there, and there is another one which is happening in Hira Mandi, because the wife's daughter is getting married, and there is an all-night singing that is happening. So Lahore, in that sense, and this is where my profound disagreement with Pran Neville. Pran Neville is, in fact, only speaking about, and nostalgically about the elite. He is not speaking about the other culture that was growing up in the city, and for me, that culture is equally important.
I think it's very important. But may I tell you, Hira Mandi has been closed down now. There is no Hira Mandi there. To my great horror, when I went there last time, the Afghans have taken over that part of Lahore, and they just produced chappals and Peshawari shoes and all that. So Hira Mandi is closed down. It's not there as an institution.
I went there to meet Tafu Khan Sahab. And
individuals individuals ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਆਈਡੀਓਲੋਜੀਕਲ ਸਟੇਟ ਮਜ਼ਹਬ ਦੇ ਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਹਿੰਦੂਆਂ ਦੀ ਬਣਾ ਦਿਓ, ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਬਣਾ ਦਿਓ, ਮੁਸਲਮਾਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਬਣਾ ਦਿਓ, ਉਹ ਕਲਚਰ ਦਾ ਸਤਿਆਨਾਸ਼ ਕਰ ਦੇਣਗੇ. This is what I'm saying.
But you must write on Kartar Singh, because Kartar Singh remains a very let's say a very marginal film in the memory of people. Whereas the Bengali, partition cinema is really out in the front. Kartar Singh needs to be written about.
I think so. Whenever I have Indian colleagues I talk to, I tell them, please go and see. There's a very good copy on YouTube of Kartar Singh. Clear again, so you can just see how enlightened is that film. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very, that's a kind of let's say that's a kind of a very different film within that context, if I may put it only mildly like this.
There is another film made in 65 called Malangi.
Yes,
but in
yes,
Malangi,
I'm aware of that.
Malangi, the Hindu this time is a man who's very greedy, and he's a banya and so on. So the character is changed by 65. But in 59, when this Muslim girl who's recovered, from the partition, she's getting married, it ends on this, that tere mame Premnath ne eh tere shadi da joda bhejya. So othe o jada Hindu di portrayal hai, as a mama hai, human being ohi hai. But by 65, after the 65 war, I think character badalne shuru ho gaye. Aisa ho gaya. ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਵੀ ਤੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਬਾਰਡਰ ਫਿਲਮ ਬਣੀ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਉਹ ਉਹਦੇ ਚ
ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਰ, ਪਰ I was part of a Pakistani film that was made in the year 2002, that is ਖਾਮੋਸ਼ ਪਾਣੀ.
ਉਹਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ.
ਉਸ ਫਿਲਮ ਦਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਰਿਲੇਸ਼ਨਸ਼ਿਪ ਹੈ, and recently with ਕਾਤਿਲ ਹਸੀਨਾओं के नाम, which is again, but then you're right that the cinema has shifted, and so has the other, OTT mode. They've shifted to Karachi. In fact, they've not even shifted to Karachi, they've shifted to London. This is very fascinating, because Asim Abbasi's Cake, for instance, Asim lives in London. Meenu Gaur lives in London. Farjad, I'm not aware of Farjad, but definitely this Mazhar Zaidi lives in London. So they are making films from there.
And I think, pata nahi jo Punjabi koi hai bhi ke nahi hai, they are all, Zaidi Saab must be a Urdu speaking character.
No, Mazhar Zaidi speaks excellent Punjabi.
Achha?
Farjad speaks very good Punjabi. And then there is this girl whose father is a very big theatre person who lives in New York. Jinne Ramchand Pakistani बनाई सी.
अच्छा.
मैंने उन नाम बोल रहा था, उन्हें मैं मिले से थे न्यूयॉर्क, मेरे उधर मुलाकात हुई सी.
ठीक.
तो पाकिस्तानी सिनेमा मेरे हिसाब नाल इस वक्त ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਣ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਬਜੈਕਟਿਵਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਕੁਐਸਚਨਸ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਬੜੇ ਪੋਇਗਨੈਂਟ ਨੇ.
I have been told that. ਜੀ ਜੀ ਹੁਣ ਕੁਝ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਲੋਕ ਡੇਅਰ
ਨਾ
ਕਰਕੇ
ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ
ਹਾਂ ਹੁਣ
ਇਨ
ਕੁਝ ਹੋ
ਫੈਕਟ
ਰਿਹਾ
ਆਈ ਐਮ ਸੌਰੀ ਈਵਨ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਸਿਨੇਮਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨਵਾਂ ਸਿਨੇਮਾ ਬਣ ਰਿਹਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਬਜੈਕਟਿਵਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨਵੀਂ ਸਬਜੈਕਟਿਵਿਟੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਮਰਜ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਕੁਝ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਬੜੀਆਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਨਾਯਾਬ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਮੂਵਿੰਗ ਨੇ
ਬੜੀ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ
ਬਾਕੀ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜੋ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਉਹਦੇ ਉਧਰ ਵੀ ਬੇੜਾ ਗਰਕ ਤੇ ਇੱਧਰ ਵੀ ਹੈ
ਜੀ ਹੋਰ ਦੋਸਤ
ਹਾਂਜੀ।
ਸੱਜਣੋ ਦੱਸੋ ਹੋਰ ਕੀ
ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਈਵਨਿੰਗ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਜੀ ਵੀ ਨੀਡ ਅਨਦਰ ਈਵਨਿੰਗ
ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਕੋਈ ਹੋਰ ਸਿੰਗਰ ਬੈਠਾ ਹੈ ਇਹਦਾ ਵੀ ਗਾਣਾ ਇੱਕ ਸੁਣ ਲੈਣੇ ਹੈ
ਹਾਂ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਸੁਣਾਓ
ਹਾਂ ਜੀ ਵਿਵੇਕ ਜੀ ਸੁਣਾਓ
ਬੰਦਾ ਬੈਠਾ ਹੈ ਨਾਲ
ਇਹ
ਤੁਹਾਡੇ
ਵਿਵੇਕ
ਦੇਖੋ,
ਜੀ
ਜਦੋਂ ਮਦਨ ਗੋਪਾਲ ਜੀ ਬੈਠੇ ਹੋ ਤੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਹੋਰ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਗਾਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ।
ਨਹੀਂ ਨਹੀਂ
ਮਾਲ ਕਰਨ ਦੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਹੁਣੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਸੁਣਾਇਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਗਾਣਾ
ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸੁਣਾ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੁਣਾਓ।
ਨਹੀਂ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਸੁਣਾ ਚੁੱਕਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੀਗੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਇੱਥੇ
ਨਹੀਂ ਮੈਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਨਾ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਮੈਂ
ਮੈਂ
ਫਰਮਾਇਸ਼
ਤਾਂ
ਕੀਤੀ।
ਸੁਣਾਤਾ ਸਾਵਨ ਕੇ
ਅਸੀਂ ਸੁਣਾਂਗੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਵਿਵੇਕ ਜੀ
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੁਣਾਇਆ।
अरे नहीं मैं सुनाता सावन के नज़ारे हैं आहा आहा
ਤਾਂ ਕਦੀ
ਉਹ
ਦੁਆ
ਜ਼ਮਾਨੇ ਦੇ
ਕਰੋ
ਗਾਣੇ
ਕਦੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਮਿਲ
This is from
ਬੈਠੀਏ
Khazanchi. But I
ਮੈਂ
was really moved by Khandan. Let me say that. ਉਹਦੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਇਮਤਿਆਜ਼ ਅਲੀ ਤਾਜ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਪੂਰਾ ਦਾ ਪੂਰਾ in fact there is a debate very fascinating right in the beginning about the real and the unreal nature of cinema which I think is philosophically very profound. ਉਹ throughout ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕੈਪਚਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਰਦਾ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਡਿਬੇਟ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਇਹ ਇੱਥੇ ਉਹ ਹੀ ਇਜ਼ ਟੇਕਿੰਗ ਅ ਲੀਡ ਓਵਰ the cinema in Kolkata.
ਹਾਂ ਆਈ ਐਮ ਸ਼ੋਰ ਇਮਤਿਆਜ਼ ਅਲੀ ਤਾਜ ਦੀ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਨਾਰਕਲੀ ਫਿਲਮ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਬਣੀ ਹੈ ਮੁਗਲ ਆਜ਼ਮ ਦਿਸ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਇਜ਼ ਅ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟਡ ਬਾਈ ਤਾਜ ਆਪਣਾ ਇਮਤਿਆਜ਼ ਅਲੀ ਤਾਜ ਐਕਚੁਅਲ ਫੈਕਟ ਤੇ ਇੰਜ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਤੇ ਸਾਰੀ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਹੈ ਇਮਤਿਆਜ਼ ਅਲੀ ਤਾਜ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਬਾਰ-ਬਾਰ ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਦੇ ਮੁਗਲ ਆਜ਼ਮ ਕਦੀ ਅਨਾਰਕਲੀ ਤੇ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਈ ਦਫਾ ਬਣ ਚੁੱਕੀ ਹੈ ਅਨਾਰਕਲੀ ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਦੋ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਤੇ ਜ਼ਿਕਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ ਹੀਰ ਰਾਂਝਾ ਦੀ ਅਡੈਪਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ
ਜੀ ਜੀ
ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਜੇ ਹੋਰ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਦੋ ਅਡੈਪਟੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਬੁੱਕ ਦੇ ਅੰਦਰ
ਕਾਰਦਾਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਨਾ
ਇੱਕ ਤੇ ਕਾਰਦਾਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਬਣਾਈ ਸੀ ਨਾ ਉਹ ਤੇ ਮਹਿਲ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਸਾਇਲੈਂਟ ਮੂਵੀ ਸੀ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਨਾਲ ਜਾਂ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਲ
ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਧਰ ਬੜੀ ਫੇਮਸ ਬਣੀ ਜਿੰਦੇ ਨਾਲ
ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਬਰਦਸਤ ਹੀਰ ਬਣੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਅੱਛਾ ਹੀਰ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਡੀ ਬਣੀ ਹੈ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੀ ਹੀਰ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਦੇਖੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਾਲੀ ਬਣੀ ਹੈ ਖਵਾਜਾ ਖੁਰਸ਼ੀਦ ਅਨਵਰ ਦੀ ਹੀਰ 1970 ਚ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਚ ਫਿਰਦੌਸ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਜਾਜ਼ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਦੇਖੋ
ਹਾਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ
ਉਹਦਾ ਮਿਊਜ਼ਿਕ ਦਾ ਤੇ ਜਵਾਬ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹ ਖਵਾਜਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਬੰਬੇ ਫਿਲਮ ਇੰਡਸਟਰੀ ਚ ਮਿਊਜ਼ਿਕ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਰੋਸ਼ਨ ਵਾਜ਼ ਹਿਜ਼ ਅਸਿਸਟੈਂਟ ਹੋਰ ਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਆਪਣਾ ਸ਼ੰਕਰ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਅਸਿਸਟੈਂਟ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਸੋ ਖਵਾਜਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਟੈਂਪਲ ਰੋਡ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਸਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਘਰ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਘਰ ਸੀ ਸੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਮਿਊਜ਼ਿਕ ਨੂਰ ਜਹਾਨ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਗਵਾਇਆ ਇੰਤਜ਼ਾਰ ਫਿਲਮ ਦੇ ਬੜੇ ਜ਼ਬਰਦਸਤ ਗਾਣੇ ਨੇ ਸੋ some of the Pakistani music and films of the 50s and 60s were as good as those being made in India. ਜਦੋਂ ਹੋਇਆ ਨਾ 1970 ਚ ਭੁੱਟੋ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦਾ Islamic socialism and the right-wing mullahs then came into politics, then everything like creativity and became censored and intimidated and so on. ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਜ਼ਿਆਉਲ ਹਕ ਦਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਇਹ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਸ਼ਤਰੁਘਨ ਸਿਨਹਾ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਬੇਟਾ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਦਾ ਸੀ ਐਂਡ he would come and stay with Zia Saab's family because Zia's daughter, who was mentally challenged or whatever, was fascinated by this man. So privately he was so kind and so entertaining, lekin otherwise public face ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਹਾਰਡਕੋਰ ਇਸਲਾਮਿਸਟ ਦੀ ਸੀ ਇਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਇਆ
ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਇੱਕ ਗੱਲ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਬੜੀ ਵਧੀਆ ਲੱਗੀ ਹੈ
ਦੱਸੋ ਇੱਕ ਲੱਗੀ ਹੈ
ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅਯੂਬ ਖਾਨ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਜ਼ਿਕਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਨਾ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਮੇਰੀ ਬਚਪਨ ਦੀ ਇਮੇਜਿਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਜੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਲਾਹੌਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਜਸ਼ਨ ਮੌਸੀਕੀ ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਅਖੀਰ 'ਚ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਇਹ ਅਯੂਬ ਖਾਨ ਦੀ ਕੰਟਰੀਬਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਸੀ ਮੈਂ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਫਰੀਦਾ ਖਾਨਮ ਹੋਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਔਰ ਮੇਦੀ ਹਸਨ ਨੂੰ ਉੱਥੇ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਵਾਹ ਜੀ ਵਾਹ I was a little child and it was really amazing that festival and it continued for a few years actually.
It did ਬਲਕਿ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾਏ ਕਿ ਤਾਸ਼ਕੰਦ ਐਗਰੀਮੈਂਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਯੂਬ ਖਾਨ ਐਂਡ ਲਾਲ ਬਹਾਦਰ ਸ਼ਾਸਤਰੀ ਜੀ did a great service to this subcontinent ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਜੰਗ ਨੂੰ ਕਲੋਜ਼ ਕਰਨੇ ਆ ਐਂਡ ਸੋ ਅਯੂਬ ਖਾਨ he is the only one who brought Muslim family law ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇੰਡੀਆ 'ਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ। ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਹਲੇ ਵੀ ਮਹਿਲ 4 ਸ਼ਾਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਮੁਸਲਮਾਨ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਵਟਐਵਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹਦਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਾਲੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ laws introduce ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਸਨ whereby that became difficult, not impossible but difficult. So some of the better reforms introduced were done by a military ruler. Pakistan the politics, the meri kitab padho, Pakistan the garrison state, and then you will understand it's a very different ball game than the usual stuff you see, you know. Aaj bada maza aaya and I have enjoyed it so thoroughly. Professor Mohinder Singh horan de naal shuru hi te meri thodi hoyi hai because I was so enthusiastic. ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ 3:30 ਅਸੀਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਉਹ 3:50 ਹੈ 3:50 ਨੇ ਸੋ 50 ਨੂੰ I was reading 30. You can imagine I was in such a great hurry. ਲੇਕਿਨ ਬੜਾ ਮਜ਼ਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਅੱਜ।
We thoroughly enjoyed it.
ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਸਰ। ਇਹਦੀ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਭੇਜਣੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੈਂ ਆਪਣੇ YouTube ਤੇ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰਾਂਗਾ, ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਪਲੀਜ਼। Anything more I can do, and I must thank all of you for this very generous favor you have done to me. ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਹਤਰ discussion ਇਸ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਤੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ and I'm deeply touched and this has been very very kind. ਅਬ ਲੇਕਿਨ ਯਾਰ ਪਾਰਟੀਸ਼ਨ ਦੀ ਵਜ੍ਹਾ ਨਾਲ ਹੁਣ ਅਸੀਂ ਮਿਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ, ਯਾਨੀ ਚਲੋ ਟੈਕਨੋਲੋਜੀ ਨੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਮਦਦ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ। ਆਪਣਾ ਗੋਪਾਲ ਮਦਨ ਗੋਪਾਲ ਜੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੰਮ ਆ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਟੈਕਨੋਲੋਜੀ। So very kind of you, madam. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. This has really been one of the most invigorating and engaging sessions ever. ਤੇ ਮੇਰੀ ਤਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਪਿਕਚਰਾਂ ਦੀ ਲਿਸਟ ਲੰਬੀ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਹੈ, ਮੈਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਨੋਟ ਕਰ ਲੈਣੇ and I will show
ਦੋ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨੀ ਫਿਲਮਾਂ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਦੇਖਣੀਆਂ, 2 ਦੇਖਣੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ, ਇੱਕ ਕਰਤਾਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਔਰ ਇੱਕ ਹੀਰ ਰਾਂਝਾ, ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨੀ ਹੀਰ ਰਾਂਝਾ by Khurshid Anwar, produced by Khurshid Anwar.
Absolutely, 1970. I have noted down. Anji.
और अपना मदन गोपाल जी, तुसी अपना प्रोफेसर सचदेवा ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਮਿਸ ਕਰਤਾ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਰੋਲ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਣਾ ਹੈ, ਸੋ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਸਿਨੇਮੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ।
ਪਰ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਸਚਦੇਵਾ ਨੇ ਗਾਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੁਣਾਇਆ ਤੇ ਰੋਲ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ
ਸੁਣਾ ਦਿਓ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੁਣਾ ਦਿਓ ਹੁਣ, ਸੁਣਾ ਦਿਓ
ਕਿ ਮਦਦ ਜੀ ਵਾਲੋ
ਸੁਣਾਓ।
ਮੈਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਦੁਆ ਇਹ ਕਰਦੇ ਆਂ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਮਿਲ ਬੈਠੀਏ ਇੱਕ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਤੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ
ਮੇਰੀ ਦੁਆ ਵੀ ਇਹੀ ਹੈ,
ਆਮਨੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ ਹੈ ਨਾ,
ਉਹ ਗੱਲ ਹੀ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ, ਉਹਦਾ ਤਾਂ ਜਵਾਬ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਉਹਦਾ ਤਾਂ ਜਵਾਬ
ਡੈਫੀਨਿਟਲੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਮਹਿਫਿਲ, ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਬੈਠਕ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਐਸਾ ਸਬਬ ਬਣੇ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਭ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਕਰੀਏ ਤੇ ਹੋ ਸਕੇ।
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਯਾਰ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਤੇ ਭਜਵਾਓ ਆਪਣਾ, ਆਈ ਵੁੱਡ ਲਾਈਕ ਟੂ ਕਮ ਟੂ ਇੰਡੀਆ।
ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸਵੀਡਨ ਕਰੀਏ, ਦੋਨੋਂ ਆ ਜਾਣਗੇ ਸਵੀਡਨ ਵਿੱਚ,
ਤੁਸੀਂ
ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨੀ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਵੀ ਹੈ ਉੱਥੇ, ਬੜਾ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਈਵਨਿੰਗ ਇਨ ਯੂਰ ਹੋਮ, ਇੱਥੇ
ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਐਸੀ ਮਹਿਫਿਲ ਹੋਏਗੀ, ਸਾਡੇ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਪੂਰੀ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ। ਹਾਂਜੀ, ਸੋ ਮੋਸਟ ਵੈਲਕਮ, ਲੈਟਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਮਿਸ ਟੂ ਮੀਟ ਐਸ ਸੂਨ ਐਸ ਵੀ ਕੈਨ। ਕਿਉਂ ਜੀ?
ਇੱਥੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲੀਏ, ਕਰਤਾਰਪੁਰ ਕੋਰੀਡੋਰ ਮਿਲੀਏ, ਕਿੱਥੇ ਤਾਂ ਮਿਲੀਏ,
ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹ ਮਜ਼ਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਜੀ। ਤੁਸੀਂ
ਚਲ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ, ਆਪਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ।
ਚਲੋ ਆ ਜਾਓ ਤੁਸੀਂ।
ਜੋ ਮੈਂ ਲੰਡਨ ਸੀਗਾ, ਜੋ ਮਜ਼ਾ ਉੱਥੇ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਸੀ ਨਾ, ਅਚਾਨਕ ਪੈਨਸਲ ਕੱਢ ਬਾਹਰ ਆਇਆ।
ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਅਨਮਿਊਟ ਯੋਰਸੈਲਫ, ਮਦਨ ਗੋਪਾਲ ਜੀ ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਅਨਮਿਊਟ ਯੋਰਸੈਲਫ।
ਸੇਇੰਗ ਇਹ ਸਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਟੂਰ ਖਰਾਬ ਨਾ ਕਰੋ, ਅਸੀਂ ਸਵੀਡਨ ਜਾਣਾ ਹੈ, ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮਹਿਫਲ ਲਾਣੀ ਹੈ।
ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਆਓ ਤੁਸੀਂ, ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਆਓ। ਹਾਂ, ਮੇਰੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ 100 ਦਫਾ ਆਓ ਤੁਸੀਂ।
ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਇਨਵਾਈਟ ਕਰ ਲਿਆ, ਲਾਈਕ ਟੂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਜ਼।
ਇਹ 100 ਦਫਾ ਥੋੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮੈਟਿਕ ਹੈ, ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਰਿਹਾ। ਇਹਦੇ ਚ ਇੱਕ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਨਾ ਪੇਚ ਹੈ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਾਣਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਜੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ।
ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਆਓ ਤੁਸੀਂ, ਮੈਂ ਤੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਟਸ ਐਨ ਓਪਨ ਇਨਵੀਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਫੋਰਐਵਰ, ਜੋ ਤੱਕ ਮੈਂ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਾ ਹਾਂ।
ਦੇਖੋ ਜੀ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਕਾਫੀ ਪੀਤੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ ਚ।
ਅਸੀਂ ਪੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ ਵਿੱਚ।
ਇਹ ਵਿਚਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਨਾ, ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੁਝ ਕਰੋ ਖਿਆਲ।
ਬਿਲਕੁਲ
ਸਰ, ਬਟ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਬ੍ਰਾਈਟਨੈਸ ਅਹਿਮਦ ਸਰ ਦੇ ਚਿਹਰੇ ਤੇ ਆਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਲਾਹੌਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਂ ਤੇ, ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਦ ਬੈਸਟ ਡੈਸਟੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਵੁੱਡ ਬੀ ਲਾਹੌਰ। And the way
Actually,
he blushed when
actually,
you mentioned Lahore, I
if
think
you come to Lahore, I can be the greatest host on earth.
Fantastic.
If I were in Lahore,
That's good.
gal hi ho rahe na, gal hi ho rahe.
That's good.
right.
Let's hope things move for the better. Kadi te
Let us pray. I mean,
banange. हाँ जी.
borders become irrelevant at some time.
Let's
ਇੱਕ ਮੈਂ
hope.
ਗੱਲ ਕਹਿਣੀ ਚਾਹਾਂਗਾ, ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗਿਆ।
ਜੀ
ਇੰਡੀਆ 'ਚ ਨਵਾਂ ਟ੍ਰੈਂਡ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਤੋਂ ਆਇਆ, ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਆਫ ਕੈਲੀਫੋਰਨੀਆ ਬਰਕਲੇ ਤੋਂ ਪਾਰਟੀਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਊਜ਼ੀਅਮ। ਇੱਥੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਨਈਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਜੀ ਬੜੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਦੇਗੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ, ਮਿਊਜ਼ੀਅਮ ਬਣਾਓ। ਮੈਂ ਅਪੋਜ਼ ਕਰਦਾ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕਿ ਵੇਅਰ ਆਰ ਦੀ ਪੋਜ਼ਿਟਿਵ ਸਟੋਰੀਜ਼। ਮੈਂ ਕਰਤਾਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਸੁਣਿਆ, ਸੱਚੀ ਗੱਲ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਸੁਣਿਆ।
ਠੀਕ ਹੈ।
ਵਾਟ ਇਜ਼ ਪਾਰਟੀਸ਼ਨ? ਨੈਗੇਟਿਵ ਮਿਊਜ਼ਿਕ। ਇੱਥੇ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਤੀਵੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਤਲਬ ਮਿਸਬਿਹੇਵ ਕੀਤਾ, ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਕੀਤਾ। ਵਾਟ ਇਜ਼ ਦਿਸ? ਵੇਅਰ ਆਰ ਦੀ ਪੋਜ਼ਿਟਿਵ ਸਟੋਰੀਜ਼? ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਟਾਕ ਸੁਣ ਕੇ ਮੈਂ ਨੋਟ ਲਈ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ, ਇਹ ਫਿਲਮਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਦੋਨਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬਾਂ 'ਚ ਦਿਖਾਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀਆਂ, ਦੋਨਾਂ ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ 'ਚ ਦਿਖਾਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀਆਂ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਪੋਜ਼ਿਟਿਵ ਸਟੋਰੀਜ਼। ਪਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਿਸ ਟਾਈਪ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਕਾਲਰ ਰੱਖੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇੰਟਰਸਟਡ ਹੋਣਗੀਆਂ ਜਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੋਏਗਾ। ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਕਰਾਂਗਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਈਮੇਲ ਪਾਵਾਂਗਾ, ਫਿਲਮਾਂ ਸੁਜੈਸਟ ਕਰਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਖੀਏ। ਮਾਧੁਰੀ ਵੀ ਦੇਖੇਗੀ, ਮਦਨ ਗੋਪਾਲ ਨੇ ਦੇਖੀਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ, ਵਿਵੇਕ ਨੇ ਦੇਖੀਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ, ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਣੇ ਚਾਹਾਂਗੇ।
ਬਸ
ਖਾਸ
ਠੀਕ ਹੈ।
ਕਰ ਮੈਂ ਯਾਦ ਹੈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਬੋਲ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਬੋਲਡ ਫਿਲਮ ਹੈ। ਬੋਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ
हाँ जी,
ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨੀ ਫਿਲਮ ਕਿੰਨੀ
हाँ,
ਬੋਲਡ ਫਿਲਮ ਹੈ,
बहुत बोल्ड फिल्म है।
ਬਹੁਤ ਬੋਲਡ ਫਿਲਮ।
हाँ कुछ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀ ਫਿਲਮਾਂ
Things are not that bad.
It's not bad
So
at
let
all.
us pray.
हाँ
A
जी,
time will
बिल्कुल.
come when borders will become irrelevant. That is all.
They must become irrelevant. They must become irrelevant.
A time has to come.
ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਇੱਕ ਫਿਲਮ ਕਲੱਬ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰੋ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਦਾ ਇੰਚਾਰਜ ਬਣਾਓ, ਆਪਣੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੂੰ। You must have regular screenings there, and it's actually needed, and you'll actually get a very good a substantial number of people coming and attending those film screenings. बहुत documentaries ਬੜਾ ਕੰਮ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈ।
ਹਾਂਜੀ,
ਬਹੁਤ ਕੰਮ ਹੋਇਆ। ਦੇਖੋ ਲਾਹੌਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੱਜ ਮੈਂ ਦੇਖ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਈ ਲੋਕ, ਇੱਕ ਹੈ ਬਾਲ ਵਾਲਾ ਔਰ ਮਹਿਲੋ ਪਿੱਛੋਂ ਜਲੰਧਰ ਤੋਂ ਯੰਗ ਮੈਨ ਹੀ ਇਸ ਕੰਮ, ਉਹ ਕ੍ਰਿਸ਼ਨ ਚੰਦਰ ਦਾ ਘਰ, ਰਾਜਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਬੇਦੀ ਦਾ ਘਰ ਲਾਹੌਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਕਨਈਆ ਲਾਲ ਕਪੂਰ ਦਾ ਘਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਲੱਭ ਲਿਆ। ਉਹ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਬਣਾ ਕੇ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਕਾਮਨੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਲ ਹੋਰਾਂ ਦਾ ਘਰ। ਮੈਂ YouTube ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਸਾਰੀ ਫਿਗਰਸ ਦਿਆਂਗਾ। ਲਾਹੌਰ ਇਜ਼ ਸਟਿਲ ਅ ਲਿਵਿੰਗ ਸਿਟੀ। ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਟੈਲੈਕਚੁਅਲ opposition to all this exists, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇੰਨੀ ਰਿਪਰੈਸ਼ਨ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦੀ। But people, the creative people are always there. ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ, ideology cannot kill creativity. Creativity finds its ways. ਤੇ ਉਹ there are ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲਿੰਕਸ ਵੀ ਭੇਜਾਂਗਾ, ਠੀਕ ਹੈ।
ਇੱਕ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਰਾਜ ਕਪੂਰ ਦੀ ਕੋਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਕਿਤਾਬ 'ਚ ਪੜ੍ਹੀ, ਯਾਦ ਆ ਗਈ ਮੈਨੂੰ।
ਹਾਂਜੀ,
ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ultimately there has to be one religion for the whole world. There has to be one religion. That
मैं पहले adopt कर
love.
I'm already converted to it.
One religion.
Great. I'm already converted to it. Thank you so much, ji.
Thank you so much, everyone.
It's been lovely.
Well, thank you.
This is truly Punjabi. आज पूरी Punjabi है उसकी feeling.
अहमद साहब पुरजो के माफ।
नहीं जी सर, कुछ भी नहीं. Absolutely not, sir.
Thank you.
All the best.
All right.